Hello YouTube, welcome back. I am Shaggy, I am Phileletea, and today I'm going to read for you an essay. Not an old essay, but the newest essay. I titled this one, Revelation, or I Found the Voice to Write Again, You Be Damned. We're just going to get right into it. I realize in a new and surprising, to me, way nearly every day now that I've been homeless for 29 days just how different I am from you, average user of the internet. Maybe once there was a place where people like me spent time online. I don't know. I never found it, but come to think of it, I've never once seen Dris Duerden so much as mentioned online. Well, by anyone but me. But this conversation I'm having with myself might end up an addenda to or another post entirely separate from this one. Maybe. Probably. That's because I don't identify by the things I used to spend a lot of time doing. My Final Fantasy Let's Plays are a glaring counterexample I will be exploring in another piece. The spirit is upon me. I have thoughts I wish to workshop in text, and you will be damned, one way or the other, whatever I say. So I'm saying what I have to say, your redemption irrespective. This is mine, after all, no matter how much you pay me. That means it's mine to intermittently destroy, to improve, as I feel so inclined. Inclined, I will so be again, and again, and again. Having now written in this piece that I do not identify with my past, I do bring myself to a critical impasse. I can ask whether that isn't because you never grew out of what you once liked to do, which begs a whole series of questions I lack answers to. And you won't cooperatively participate in this process to help me learn. Or I can turn the light of truth on myself and I can interrogate me, my alter ego, that lying liar. If I don't identify with my past, you might ask, if you were me, with what do I identify? Let's take a moment to meditate about question asking. Most questions are obvious and in that way basic. The obvious question, any journalist will tell you, is your bread and butter if what you want to be is consistently paid for asking questions. I do not want to be paid, not consistently, not at all, for asking questions. Questions are only the beginning of the process, and the people I speak to on the regular are too self-unaware to hold a conversation around the questions I want to ask. Just look what happens when I ask what I think are simple questions on Twitter. People pull the "I don't have to answer this" of the enlightened despot or the politician. It's actually hilarious how much people play king online. Significantly less hilarious how often they do so in retail establishments and fast food eateries. Their reason, though, unlike the politician or the criminal, isn't that they don't have to incriminate themselves. Better said, it isn't that they don't have to unmask themselves as too stupid to answer the question. Their reason is that they can't think that deeply and can't be asked to, won't be asked to, have never been willing to be asked to. And good for them. Good for you, if you pull that nonsense. You're too stupid to be here. You really should unsubscribe and spend your money on someone else. They'll lie to you about how much you actually are worth. I can't be asked, not even for the equivalent in daily income to a house and property taxes. Actually, it isn't even that I can't be asked. It's that I will not be asked. Let's get back on track. I did draft this out before I began typing today. As usual, my thoughts are ahead of my essays. If I don't identify with my past, with what do I identify? I don't think I know. I think that's why I wander so far off track. Donald Trump calls it the circle back. He criticizes the news media, the journalists, and the pundits because they can't listen to an answer long or well enough to realize that he's wandered from a straight answer to give you truth, then circle back to the answer in a way that will bring it home and keep it memorable for the person who's actually listening. The circle back. I liked that a lot. I'm stealing it. He'll be dead soon enough anyway, and who really cares if I steal from Donald J. Trump? He's talking about seekers. He's talking, when he circles around a topic only to double back on it, to two seekers. He's speaking the truth to you at an abstraction that you can understand it without either condescending to you or putting you or your nation at risk of speaking things he shouldn't in places and at times that he shouldn't. I think we all thought we were getting our first white trash president when Donald J. Trump was first elected. I think we expected security scandals like paperwork going to his home that shouldn't. And I don't think any of us was surprised when he was accused of doing such. I think we expected gaffes galore as he realized the job wasn't for him and he wasn't a good fit in the chair. But it turned out he's actually pretty good at it. Donald J. Trump has a mind that can learn. That's something. He can adapt and grow in office. That's new for American politics. Usually our politicians get worse as they're at their jobs as greater responsibility is granted them. There are too many examples to get lost in those weeds. I'm circling around DJT because these things I'm saying about him, I know are true. I don't know what I'm going to say next is true. I use the circle back to demonstrate that even when I don't know what I'm saying or whether it's true, I do know what I'm talking about. Knowing what I'm talking about is better than you can do. So when I ask, with what do I identify? The answer is I don't know. I certainly don't identify with Donald Trump, but I can recognize the circle back as a habit I've also developed, which means I can recognize something like what I identify with in DJT's influences. So I can recognize that he and I are similar people with similar interests. Interest is a word I'm not exploring in this piece, but will be soon. Actually, I am exploring it in this piece to a small degree. I think of myself as someone who loves fantasy novels and rom-coms. I like to snuggle on the couch with a girl who likes me, and I like to test myself against nature. That's capital nature. That means the goddess. That really just means what it means. I like to see if I can survive in extreme elements, extreme conditions. I like to watch highly skilled people compete, and I like to wait at my seat until everyone else has filled their plate before I stand to get mine. But you wouldn't know any of that from my material. You wouldn't know any of that from what I think about, what I talk about. You couldn't come to get to know me, not quickly, by what I make and what I do. My actions and my thoughts are fully and totally incongruous in that way. They don't line up. They're usually juxtaposed as polar opposites, mutually exclusive. But you wouldn't know that either if I weren't honest with you. You'd just think I'm weird and confusing, because I am. But even all those things I think of myself doing are incongruous with who I am. The last fantasy novel I read was in 2021. It's October 24 at time of writing. The last rom-com I watched was in 2017 or 18. The last time I snuggled on the couch with a girl who actually liked me was even before then, 2015 or 2016, if she even liked me at the time. She grew to dislike me intensely. So I have to wonder about myself whether those things are even a small part of my personality, my identity. And I realize that my identity, that with which I identify, does not have to be my personality. I overthink things. What may be obvious to you isn't always obvious to me. This is one of those things. Your personality doesn't have to match your clothes. You don't have to fit in your skin. In fact, there's approaching a 100% certainty that you are significantly too big for your skin whenever is your time of reading. I have to fit my identity or it isn't me. It's a person I'm pretending to be. I promised myself in high school that I'd never pretend to be anyone but a better version of who I am today. I've never broken that promise to myself, and I will never break it. Not for my ex-wife, not for any of the women I loved before or after her, not for all the heartbreak in the universe, not for nothing, not even for absolution. not even for conscious reunion with the source. Never. I don't make promises just to break them willy-nilly. I need a good reason. And pretending to be you just isn't a good enough reason. You aren't that fucking great. You're pretty neat. Maybe. Probably not, actually, the more you get to know you. But you aren't that fucking neat either. These things that are true about my likes, my preferences, even my personality, they're irrelevant to you as far as I am concerned as a storyteller. I can insist on my personality. I can insist on many things. But the more I insist on any one thing, the more likely you are to know I'm insisting on myself. Which I now realize you may not even understand why that's important. Why you should know whether I'm insisting upon myself or not, and why it's bad to do it. I dost think I protest too much, indeed. See, I get this impression that you think you have to be dyed in the wool of old shit in order to understand old shit. But I spend my life doing things other than the things I prefer to do. I really do think, if there's any one thing that makes me different from you, fundamentally so, it's that I have compunctions against doing what I would prefer to be doing. But I have no illusions that I will be doing anything else with the majority of my time. Life, as I say, is a ball of shit you either get to roll around in or which rolls over you. One way or the other, you come out of it covered in shit. Do you think Donald Trump really needs the shit slinging of politics? Shitty people don't mind getting covered in shit. That's true. But that finger points in every direction if you're talking about presidential candidates. If Kamala is the unanimous party selection, she's covered in significantly more shit than DJT. He's not unanimous within GOP power circles. Populists never are. That's why you see so few populist politicians. Historically, too few shitty people are willing to get covered in shit to say anything at all about the people at the bottom of the hill where all the shit has been rolling down. You know that idiom, don't you? Shit rolls downhill. You've seen that show, right? The Oblongs. I think that's what it was called. You've seen that cartoon, right? The two-tier outhouse where the top floor is the rich and the bottom floor is the poor. You know how outhouses didn't have plumbing? The point here is that exactly no one likes an outdated personal story. What's the point in telling a story about what I'm like that's actually years old? Do you like doing that? You haven't done it. Do you like doing that? You haven't done it in 7 years. Yeah, well, time gets weird when you're in your 30s. It doesn't get 7 years weird, Vincent. You don't just lose a decade when it comes to spending your time how you'd prefer. And that's true. Sort of. If I really liked fantasy novels and rom-coms, for example, if I really identified through those things, I would make the choices necessary to keep them a priority in my life. That's the definition of prioritizing them. But that's addict behavior. And I can tell you, I spent my 20s doing anything but addict behavior, and my 30s finding the addict behaviors I like enough to actually identify around. So maybe it's that. Maybe I'm addicted to different things than you are, and because you've never tried my addiction, you don't get why I would be addicted to those things. I can get that. Not everyone is going to be willing to sleep in a tent in the Ohio winter. I know the church I attend were grateful I did not die last weekend. Several people asked me if I had adequate insulation and food, and they've only known I exist for maybe a few hours over the course of 4 weeks. Most of the people who expressed gratitude that I had not died last weekend, I chose to skip church because the pastor, who's the real reason I'm there at all, was on vacation with his wife, I had actually never spoken to before. But they knew my name and they cared that I was alive. That is more than all of you who can hear this but one person have done. That is literally more than I can say for all of the people who were and remain subscribed to this Patreon and my YouTube from before my homelessness. All but one. Magic Shadow, you know who you are. Certainly better at any moment than I do. Not a single one of you has checked in to see whether I'm not frostbitten. None of you actually gives a fuck. And I told you that none of you gives a fuck, and what did you do? You unsubscribed like uncaring fucking cowards. That's what you did. Fucking cowards. You can't understand me. So what did you do? You fucked off instead of trying. We used to read books because strangers and acquaintances alike could ask, "What you reading?" And a conversation could start. I tried to prove that with hate reads, but you're too fucking stupid. Chicks drawing attention to themselves by reading in public and being standoffish about the conversation, even in the 17th century, are about the same thing as chicks wearing camel toe pants and being upset about the attention. Women are going to be upset about what they're going to be upset about. Everyone is. But women identify through it. We've lost our way. That much I know. We want to be interesting now. We want to take an interest in people. We want, in other words, for conversation to imitate podcasting. Instead of remembering that podcasting, especially conversational shows like Joe Rogan, are imitating life because they're art, you colossal fucking idiots. We want people to be as interesting as television and movie characters. In our hearts, it is what we want, what we lack. We know that real people aren't interesting at all. They have the same tedious, even boring lives that we do. Hell, I know that's why you all hate me so much. My life is instantly more interesting than yours, even when it's literally spent podcasting to the future from a private room and a public library. Even when it's complaining about the guy who literally takes an hour to shit in the public bathroom of the public library. That's more interesting than your bullshit. Who cares what Karen from accounting is doing? There's a Karen in accounting doing the same dumb shit in every office building the world over. But instead of being happy for me that I found a way to be the storyteller I want to be, you hate me. It makes no sense. But I know I don't have to let it hold me back anymore. I don't have to seek out your approval. As soon as you sense that I am, you'll withhold it because you aren't paid well enough. Why should I be paid better? Because I am better. I have more merit. Hasn't that occurred to you yet? We know we only have to engage with real people insofar as they have something that people behind the screen can't give us. I would leave this to subtext if I could. I would have left almost all of this to subtext if I could. If you were able to read subtext at all, if you weren't so dumb, that is what comes next. I do prefer to preserve your feelings. One of the things I identify with is the group, harmony, then politeness. I would prefer to preserve your idiot worldview, but I can't. Not and be honest with you, not and fix you. I doubt it does neither of us any good if I speak harsh truths you need to hear but aren't ready to integrate fully, expecting you to react badly. Let me read that again. It does neither of us any good if I speak harsh truths you need to hear but aren't ready to integrate, if I am fully expecting you to react badly, and also for you to then react badly. Me being right that you're too stupid for me to engage with does neither of us any good. This is why you believe I'm withholding from you. And what you believe I'm withholding from you feels unfair to you. It feels unearned. The truth is, if I told you It would do neither of us any good. You would lash out at me and unsubscribe, weaponizing your subscription, my favorite human behavior, weaponizing your consumerism, a trait I find deplorable in all its abstractions. And I will walk away from you until you apologize, which you will never do because you're stupid enough to identify my sight, my foresight, my second sight, my hindsight with the enemy. It would be funny if it were happening to someone who deserved it. I want to tell you 3 stories. Think of this as an essay and 3 vignettes from my life, a demonstration of the non-linear narrative cycle of my life. My mother could never react to anything in the appropriate manner. Not anything. And there was a response appropriate to every occasion. Like Magic Shadow says about Hearthstone, and I agree with him. There is an appropriate play in Hearthstone for every round and every hand that will lead to a win. It's just up to the player or players to find it. Sometimes you do, sometimes they do. It's all in the cards, though. My mother was the middle child, and there's some secret trauma underlying all of her behaviors that I could, but which I will not unpack here. Suffice it to say that as her eldest child, my brain is the most like hers as a child of my immediate family. I am realizing as I speak, with more people of my own age and younger, that none of you knows even the basics of early human cognitive development, to say nothing of developmental psychology broadly. I don't think, in other words, that any of you knows how your brain is supposed to develop to and after adulthood. I don't think any of you knows just how much of you is a development, not out of a seed that requires no effort to bud into a full plant, but a barn which needs built and from the ground up, and which will be assaulted by the elements of your life. You don't make anything only once unless you give up on making en todo. That's Spanish for entirely, effectively. It means in all. Everything becomes an extension of the first thing you made, an expansion of the necessary skills to make it again. Our brains are still the brains of primates that figured out how to smash rocks together to make tools. Everything is tool making and tool use. And if you aren't making, you're using. And if you aren't making, you're using. You are using. And if you're not using, you're being used. That is what and how it is. Fucking cope already so we can move on to the next thing and fix this shit. Cope! This returns me to my introductory paragraph. Wheels turning within turning wheels. I say all of this to this point to mean that for the savvy person, I've already told you everything you need to know in order to feel like you know my mother pretty well, actually. And this is important. I'm not putting this in the text, but I'm going to say this directly to you. The word count of my stuff isn't because I can't articulate myself. It's because you're too fucking dumb to read it if I actually said it as summarily as I could. I could say all of this in a tenth. I could put all of this that I've gotten in this word count into a tweet. But you're too fucking stupid. That's on you that this is so long. And it pisses me off that it has to be this long in order to articulate anything to you because your dumbass won't read it. I say all of this to this point to mean that for the savvy person, I've already told you everything you need to know in order to feel like you know my mother pretty well, actually. You know her tropes. And if you read more old novels, more old writing in general, with fewer overwritten, unbelievable characters, you would know that you don't need but one character trope to have a fully human person. Because my mother is a real person. not a mother in a novel. My mother is not a Dostoevsky character. My mother is not a Dickens character. My mother is a human person. Our relationship is not fraught, but hiding an inner redemption arc for her and me both as we come to understand one another. My mother is not the mother of some television show, long-suffering but ultimately harmless. There is not some fundamental miscommunication or misunderstanding which prevents us from truly connecting as adult human beings. The primary difference between my mothers and the mothers you watch and read is that my mother is real. My mother was not focus grouped and overwritten until she had pathos and ethos for the larger viewer, until she was relatable to other women, maybe even to women like her. No, my mother does not get these things because she does not deserve these things because she does not have these things. My mother is not a three-dimensional person. Three-dimensional people only happen in books, or books are written about them. People like me. We don't have to talk about ourselves. You idiots are supposed to glorify us. But you wouldn't know the difference if I hit you in the face. Anyway, you hate me for my freedoms, for my liberty, for my generosity. And so did she. Because of who my mother was, she couldn't react appropriately. Not to anything. She had to react inappropriately. It was a compulsion because she hadn't developed out of that behavior as a child. It's just a phase, parents used to say. Yeah, spare the rod and ignore the child. It's never just a phase. It's always a budding pathology. Ignore it and pathologize the child. You can resist a compulsion. If you knew my mother like I do, you could watch her thinking, how am I going to react inappropriately to this situation? Oh, to make it about me, definitely. She's the middle child of 3 girls. This behavior is as natural to middle children as a class, as umbilical cords and amniotic fluids. Most, in other words, do grow out of it with consistent correction and education. So the story, my mother wanted me to play an instrument. Drums were a no. I wanted to sing. I cared nothing for band. But my mother got what she desired, particularly from me. So I chose trumpet. It has the fewest moving parts without being trombone. That was my thinking. So anyway, if you weren't in band, third through 9th grades, trumpet is the instrument the loud ADHD kids play. Also the overachievers who will never earn mother's love. The ADHD kids are the way they are because mother was a little too lax in her love for a little too long. And the ADHD kids are intimidated by the overachievers. So they climbed all over me, the quiet kid who knows his parents will never feel love for him. Long story short, the ADHD kid dropped and broke my trumpet. He shouldn't have been holding it, but I was at yet another new school, and she told me to make friends at this one. At least try, is what she said to me. I was nothing if not obedient. One of my parents would beat me if I weren't. It took me weeks, maybe months, to inform my parents. I really didn't want to. I didn't want the beating, that's for sure. But I was in 7th grade. I didn't want to explain that the only people to take interest in me were the ADHD kids. You were no doubt an ADHD kid. Something approaching 85% of you were. If you weren't a prep, good chance you were medicated. And if you were medicated or autistic, there's a better than zero chance that is why you're drawn to me, because you think we have the same psychopathology and we don't. Now, it's autism and body dysphoria that they teach kids to have. When I was a kid, it was attention deficit and hyperactivity. I've always had the sense that the people educating and administering education are only doing so as a means to an end, and that they, none of them, never much liked children. The point is that there is a prestige, a pride, which comes with having normal, healthy children. That's why I never saw doctors before 8th grade when the school was like, this kid's heart ain't quite right. I have a murmur. And that's why you had braces and all those surgeries and medications as a child. Your parents have no value if you aren't perfect. You'll inculcate that pathology and you'll design your babies as soon as designer babies hit the genetic eugenic market. Whatever. You're too stupid to realize that making a girl prettier than her genetics guarantees she's in a lopsided marriage and hates her ugly children. Because my mother reacted badly to everything, and my father, frankly, he and I didn't talk ever before I nearly died in 8th grade. I didn't say anything for a long time. A long time. When I did, I wrote it in a letter and slipped it into the mailbox. This isn't a treasured family memory. Do you remember that time? No. We've never spoken about it. Not even to acknowledge it happened. Not any of it. The second and third stories I'm going to tell you are more sensitive, so I'm not going to detail these characters. My first wife, ex and only at time of writing, I assume there will be another 2 or 3 in the future, left me in large part because I told her to her face that she and I can't have adult conversations that work toward the common goal of strengthening our relationship because her only reaction to stress is to cry until I fix the problem myself. She reacted by crying, so I solved the problem myself. And lastly, reacting badly on purpose for the internal narrative you can tell yourself to make being interested in yourself at least as rewarding as the shows you pacify yourself with. The last woman I loved was a pathological liar. You can't fix 'em, boys. No one woman is worth the effort of trying. Believe me, this is a pattern for me, very nearly 50 bitches long. I told her I knew she was cheating on me, so she brought him into the house where I had to know. You aren't better than this behavior, hers. Certainly you aren't better than mine, and you can't relate to me. Suck it up. Sucking is what you do. As far as I can tell, it's all you do. Especially if your name's not Magic Shadow. Thanks for being here. You know, righteous fury, righteous indignation, righteous anger, those are emotions that are put on prophets. Those are emotions that are gifted by God. So if I have it and it makes you uncomfortable, I'm better than you. I'm more beloved of God than you. Because not only am I right, I'm so right that communicating with you how right I am pisses me off. That's an act of humility. That means you should have already got here so I don't have to say this. Right? You should already be this advanced idiot. That's the position you put me in. Well, anyway, thanks for listening. Do better.